Welcome back to the What Are You Thinking podcast. Ron and Lynette Lewis here. Got a great show for you with a friend of ours, Kevin Donaldson, former police officer, host of his own podcast called The Suffering Podcast, and a brand new book coming out this fall called Man, Are You Crazy? Did I get that right? You are crazy.
Man, you are crazy.
Man, you are crazy. Anyway, Kevin, welcome. We're so happy to have you on the show today.
I've been looking forward to this for some time. I speak with Ron probably more than I want to admit through just bouncing stuff back and forth. He's really been a great inspiration in my life.
Well, likewise, my friend. Really, I mean, you've inspired us, and it was a great privilege for me to come onto your podcast and talk and share. And we went deep, but we just deep dove. And I have no doubt that we're going to have a great moment here. And no longer am I in the hot seat. You're in the hot seat today, buddy.
Well, he is in the hot seat, but we feel very grateful to you, Kevin, because you inspired us in doing our own podcast. It was really your encouragement. A lot of the things that Ron got from you, even being part of your show, wonderful. Talk to us about how you've been doing and what's going on with your podcast.
I can't take credit for it. I've been around some great people throughout this business, 2.5 years, and it is a business. And I've learned so much on what to do and what not to do. You know, you learn just as much from people who do it not wrong, but not the way you would do it, versus the people who are top of their game. Yeah. And like I said, you both of you have everything you need.
Well, thank you.
Well, my wife's a professional and I'm a rookie at this, but I'm having a great time though. And the stories that we have been culling and pulling out have just been incredible. And your story, my friend, is here in New York and New Jersey, where you live, in these two places, there's just millions of people. There's all kinds of crime. There's sociological strangulation. There's just strangulation of the craziness that's going on in this region. And you're a police officer back in the day. Mm-hmm. You're a police officer for how many years?
I did 13 years before I was forced to retire. Yeah.
And the stress level, the anxiety, the decisions, the split-second decisions that cops have to make. Is it okay if I call you a cop? I mean, is that okay? Or former cop?
It's better than what some people called me when I was on.
Yeah. Well, we want to be respectful, of course. We appreciate those who serve this industry, the police officers, firefighters, first responders. We love them. And my girls are now trained that when they pass them, they go up and say, "You're doing a great job. We're praying for you."
And you know what? That's all police officers look for. Yeah. In reality, it's just somebody to acknowledge that they're there for that person. They're not looking for medals on their chest. They're not, most of them, some of them are, but most of them are not looking for that. The high accolades to get honored by the mayor's office. Most of them are just looking for the everyday average person to say, "Hey, could I get you want some water?" And I never took water from anybody, but it was the gesture. Was all we were looking for, is the gesture of appreciation, that we're willing to put our lives on the line for somebody we don't know, never met, and it's a real life of service.
Let's go to your beginning when you decided you wanted to be a police officer and you went to the academy and all of that. What inspired you to go into that was for your profession?
I was looking for a job. That is it.
Is that a majority?
There's a lot. There's some people. My brother took police test after police test, trying to get on the police department, and it's a very competitive job market. So in New Jersey, because the salaries are quite high, that it's the number one most competitive job market in the state.
Wow.
I had a little different path. I never wanted to become a police officer. I was, at the time, I was working a job that I was traveling coast to coast. And which sounds great. I didn't have any kids. I didn't have a mortgage or anything. I was living in an apartment. So it sounds like a great job. However, living out of a suitcase, and I know both of you travel frequently, if I'm not in my own bed, I'm never off of work. Right.
Oh,
and
wow.
it weighed me down a little bit. Hey, I met some great people, but you understand why somebody like a stand-up comic becomes an alcoholic, because there's nothing else to do. You do your show, and then what? There's nobody around, So I got really tired of that. And I'm in the gym one day, and the guy says, "Well, why don't you take this test? We were given a test. He was a chief of police. I didn't know him. I just knew him from the gym to say hello to him. So why don't you take this test? So the way he sold it, it was pretty good. You get a pension, you get benefits. The pay at the time was, you're not going to get rich, but you're going to make a living. You're going to be able to support a family. And he sold a pretty darn good bill of goods. So I took the job. I took the test. I did very well on the test. And I took the job. A month into the police academy was September 11th, 2001.
Man.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
No.
So sitting in the police academy, I sat next to a female transit officer. First name's Kristen. And we're sitting there during class instruction, and the captain of the academy comes in and says, a plane just hit the World Trade Center. Well, those people who live in New York, planes hit the World Trade Center all the time. It was usually like Corey Lidell from the New York Yankees flew a Cessna into one of the buildings. So it really didn't hit home at that point.
Yeah.
Right.
Then he comes in and says, second plane just hit the World Trade Center. So you're like, wow, what's going on here?
Right.
The female officer next to me that I mentioned prior, her father worked in the World Trade Center at Cantor Fitzgerald. So she started to become a little nervous, and we all started getting a little nervous. It was sort of a little bit of chaos going on. Our departments recalled us, and as a recruit, I'm not qualified to carry yet. We didn't know whether we were at war or what was going on, as everybody was. My lieutenant hands me a gun and says, "Just don't shoot anybody." By today's standard, it seems a little extreme, but in times of crisis, you do what you have to do. We had some high-value targets in the town I worked in, so I stood post. And I remember the look of just confusion on people coming up and saying, have you heard anything? We had people calling the police department, my husband, my wife, my brother. They work in the World Trade Center. Have you heard anything? And it was a chaotic time. But I remember the look of confusion, and we were able just to give those people who were confused just a little bit of solace, just a little bit of hope to say, okay, I know it's bad over there, but we got you here.
Yeah. And people who are listening, probably maybe some people don't know that New Jersey and New York connected together. It's a constant back and forth. People who are living in New Jersey, but they work in New York City, there's just millions of people who have that routine. And so to hear about, to hear this story is so reminiscent. It's why I'm here, is because of 9/11. And then
why you're here in New York City. Yeah.
Well, you're going to hear some things throughout when I talk about how my life led to you.
Yeah. So you want to go there now? Let's talk about that. Let's go into 10 years later.
It's a long story. It's a long story. So just a little preface that I was very, very tied into my faith when I was younger. I had read the Bible, but I read it. I never read it. I read it dozens of times, but I never really read it.
Oh,
and the way you read the Bible is, you read it one page at a time. And you ingest all the information rather than getting through it like some sort of dime store novel. I went to college and for theological studies. And I had a professor.
You don't look the type, Let's get that.
I love when people misjudge me. I love it. I absolutely love it. But I had a professor, his name was Dr. John Becker, who taught the Bible as literature. And then I read the Bible as a book. And I'm like, wow, this is such a violent book. And I lost my faith. I didn't see anything in the pages. And I realized that going back, I really never saw anything in the pages of the Bible. Never. So then after that, it was game on and all the bad stuff that came along with it. But as a police officer, I had to have that hard shell around me, because there was times as a police officer where you see a dead child, okay, and the parents are just distraught, and you look at that child, and if I was a God-fearing man and somebody who was really tied into my faith, it would make me question my faith. It really, really would, because I was weak. Happen? I was weak at the time. Yes. I wasn't strong in the faith. And so that shell was essential almost to do what I did. And then, but I loved that job. I loved that job for the service-oriented job that it was. And it's not chasing bad guys. It's not getting into car chases. It's none of that. Yes, that happened. And it was exciting and it was an adrenaline rush, but so skydiving. That's not why you get into this job. You get into this job to serve people. Yeah. Then when people don't know where else to go, they're going to call the police. That happened on July 10th, 2013. It was a domestic incident at a well-known address where that was having ongoing domestic issues. A gentleman named Anthony Vocaturo decided that he couldn't live without his girlfriend anymore. So he traveled up from Florida. First, he sent a picture of himself with his gun to his head. So we knew he was somewhat serious. But he traveled up to Florida. He drove up to Florida and held her at gunpoint and was going to kill her. The victim actually had the mental acuity to dial 911 and put the phone down. In New Jersey, whenever somebody dials 911, we show up. Whether it's a misdial or whatever it is, that's the rules. We show up. The dispatcher tells us, start heading to this address. It's an open 911 call. I can't hear I don't know what's going on, but I can hear arguing in the background. We go up lights. I mean, I could tell you exactly the route I took, how fast I was going. We have our lights on, no sirens. It's about 10:45 at night. And we show up there and we can hear arguing on the other door. It's a townhouse complex. So what's the first thing that you think you're going to do is, we watch enough TV, we're going to kick in the door. Well, kicking in the door is not so easy, especially when it's a steel door.
Oh, man.
Yeah, you break your leg doing that. So I get out of the trunk what's called a Halligan bar. It's like a fireman's crowbar. And on a signal, my partner went in the back because it was a middle unit. There was only 2 exits, front and back. We had the back covered. On a signal, I start banging the front door. Now, when you open a door with this tool, you got to create a little gap and then you pop it open. The minute I start banging, I can hear, don't come in here. And then I hear pop, 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 pop. My partner and him had exchanged gunfire because as I started to bang on the door, he raised his gun to shoot this poor woman. And that was what needed to be done in order to preserve life. Straight through the back sliding glass door. Mm. So we back off, put the tool off to the side. We back off. We're like, oh, geez, what's happening? Other cops are showing up. So I tell them to watch the front door. I go around the back to make sure my partner's all right. I'm telling dispatch what's going on. And there's about a 9x9 privacy deck with slat walls and everything. There's 3 of us that go up on the deck. And I'm looking at the deck and I can see the sliding glass door. And I think if I go over to the right, I have the most tactically sound position I could get. So I get there and I had lawn furniture as cover, which in retrospect is not the greatest cover in the world. I sit there and I'm waiting. We don't see the guy. We can see the victim. We don't know where he is. We figured he went upstairs. So we come up with a plan. You got to develop these plans on the fly to throw a lawn chair through the sliding glass door, go in and get the victim, get her out. As soon as my partner throws the lawn chair through, I see the brightest flash in my life. I feel, if you've ever shot a gun, there's something called blowback where you'll feel little grains of gunpowder hit your face. I feel that. I feel my left ear wiggle. This guy was sitting right behind the door. We couldn't see him. Pulls his gun out to the side and fires a round at me. Misses my ear by 1/8 of an inch. Now, mind you, there's glass all over the floor. I go down. Now, you think in this situation you're going to panic. And some people did. As a matter of fact, one of the officers who was there did panic and ran away, left me for dead. Now I'm trapped. And I'm down on the ground and I see a lot of blood. I have no idea whether I'm shot or not. I didn't know it. I just felt my ear wiggle and I knew my shoulder hurt. That was it. But I see all this blood. What I had done was I fell on the glass. And there's glass still embedded in my arm to this day. I can't get out because of where the stairs are, which are over to the left. If I go that way, I'm in a danger zone. He's got a clear shot at me. I'm crawling on all floors. I'm 6'4". I don't crawl very quickly. So it's a turkey shoot at that point. So I'm there and all I'm thinking is, okay, this is it. This is my final stand. And I very, very slow, very lucid. I'm very calm. I think of my wife. My wife's going to have to raise my 2 young boys. My oldest was 3. My youngest was about 8 months, 7 or 8 months at the time. I think of both my kids. I'm never going to see them again. My 3-year-old will remember me, but my 7-month-old, he's not going to remember anything of me. And I say my goodbyes, and I say, okay, this is it. But if I'm going, you're coming with me. I get into a shooting position. I get into what's called a prone position. I'm on my stomach, gun drawn. Thankfully, those guys who were on the left side of the deck, they just retreated behind cover, and they were able to assist me off after about being 45 seconds trapped, which felt like 2 years. They were able to assist me off while one guy held cover, and I'm off. Hey, the guy goes upstairs. We see him go upstairs. The victim slinks out through the garage door. Job's over. He can stay up there for 5 years if he wants to. Doesn't matter. It's a barricaded suspect. There is nobody else in the house. Danger's over. So we're just sitting holding perimeter for 2 hours. My arms are stinging because it's July, because I'm sweating, and I got glass in my arm. I got blood everywhere. We're holding this perimeter, fully expecting this guy to come out and do what's called suicide by cop. He doesn't want to live anymore, obviously. He shot at police twice. And what they'll do is they'll come out and just let you kill them. Then the SWAT team comes in and the hostage negotiator, and they get me out, and I go to the hospital. Now, at the time, 2013, it's a little different than today. 10 years ago, I didn't carry my cell phone with me everywhere. All the wives talk. It's about 1 o'clock in the morning. My wife's at home. I'm afraid she's going to get a text message saying, or a call saying, hey, there was a shooting in Roseland. Is your husband working? Which the answer is obviously yes. My phone is in my car in front of the house. I can't get to my phone. So I get loaded into the ambulance and I borrow an EMT's call. And I want everybody to think about this. Somebody who you care for, somebody who you love, somebody who your life is tied to. An unknown number calls you in the middle of the night. You race, you pick up the phone. And it's me. Hey, hon, I was in a shooting. I'm okay. I got to go to the hospital. I'm not shot. I just have to get some glass removed to my arm. I'll talk to you soon. Click. Just think about what my wife had to go through. Now, mind you, at the time, I'm like, hey, that was a great job we did. We saved life. That was a great job. It was fantastic. I go to the hospital. I get the glass removed from my arm. And I come home at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. My wife's overjoyed to see me. I can't sleep because the adrenaline is still going. I go out for a run, and I finally get some sleep. Now, the police world is like a giant sewing circle. Right? Everybody's going to call you and say, hey, what happened? What happened? It's like if you ever want to interrogate a cop, all you got to do is say, hey, what's up? And they'll just throw it up. I get about 3 or 4 hours of sleep. The department said I didn't have to go in that night, and I had the weekend off. So I'm like, oh, great. I got 4 days off. This is wonderful. I get up to about 50 phone calls. I try to get back to as many people as I could. And then my wife and I, we choose to go out to dinner or go out to a movie that night just to decompress, just spend a little time together. And we go to see this movie, and it was a comedy. It was a Seth Rogen comedy called This Is the End. And in that movie, there's like the apocalypse happens. It's supposed to be funny. There's like an apocalypse happen, and people either get left here on earth, which becomes hell, or some people get shot up into heaven. And there was a big bang. And as soon as I heard the big bang, I started hyperventilating. I started sweating. I didn't understand what was happening inside of me. I had to leave. I walk out of the movie theater and I'm just trying to collect myself. I'm trying to catch my breath a little bit. And I don't want to alert my wife to any of this stuff because I don't want her to worry. She's gone through enough. She comes out after a couple minutes. I said, I made up a lie. We're real good at lying. I said, my stomach hurts. I had to go to the bathroom. I'm sorry. My stomach's killing me. She sees me standing in the hallway and she knew, like, even though I didn't tell her, she knew. She's like, hey, you know what? Let's go. This movie stinks anyway. I said, no. We'll go back in. But I couldn't breach the door. Like I couldn't open the door. So she leaves, and then that night, it's just a downhill progression from there for several years.
Wow.
Several years.
You're talking like PTSD at the highest level?
So the nightmares start almost immediately. And it's usually a nightmare like I'm in a Keystone Cops movie where I pull out my gun and I go to fire and the bang flag comes out. Or I don't have any bullets, or I'm late for work, or like really just anxiety-filled nightmares.
Let me ask you this. So this obviously PTSD, you're losing it. Was it 100% because of what had just happened with the shooting incident, or was there some form of
like a trigger
in your soul or in your life? Or from your childhood, whatever.
At the time, I swore up and down that it was from the shooting. One day I went to work, I was fine, and now I'm like this. The more I learn about post-traumatic stress, the more I realize that there are several factors that go into it. This was what spilled my glass over. This one event spilled my glass over. But what I found through therapy and through speaking to other people, that glass had been filling for a while.
Interesting.
It had been filling for a while. No doubt in my mind that this is the trigger that broke. This is the straw that broke the camel's back.
Exactly.
But it had been building for a long time. I grew up in a really rotten place with parents who should have never been my parents. And unfortunately, they have their own crosses to bear. That's something that I have never been able to forgive my parents for the way they raised me. Which is odd because I've forgiven the guy who shot at me. Took me a couple years.
Wow.
Well, you've given me a new assignment for you because you deserve to not only to be forgiven, but to experience the life that comes once you do forgive.
And Kevin, talk a minute, because I think there are a lot of people tuned in right now who this part of your story is what they relate to. I mean, we're living in a culture, a world of post-traumatic stress. People post-COVID still, the trauma, the anxiety is at all-time high levels, certainly in our country, certainly in our region here in New York. And there's so much to be said about that. And you have come so far, and you're such a force for good, and you have made it your life mission on many levels to help people find life, really. But here you are in that moment now. You're going through your post-traumatic, you're thinking, which we often do, it's this. When we find out and we dig in, it's more than that. And so talk a little bit more to finish this part of your story, to go from that then. You're having these anxiety things. Did you say it was 4 years? That it took you to really get through?
Well, there are moments in my life to this day that still are a little rough. Crowds, like coming into New York City is no joy for me because of the crowds, to be honest with you.
Wow.
It took me 8 years to go back to a professional sporting event, which I'm a big sports guy.
Yeah,
It was hard. And I have 2 small kids that I want to take this sports game. It was hard for me to do. It was hard, but so the crux, the really bad spot, and this is an important thing for me to say in this setting right here. So I was drinking just anything to try to numb the pain, self-medication, bad behavior. My wife took the brunt of it, because when you go through post-traumatic stress, you have no impulse control. It's thought, action, boom.
Wow.
She got remotes thrown at her. She got spit at. She got called every name in the book, because those of you who have been married for a long time, your spouse will do that to you, and it'll run through the back of your head. But then there's that speed bump in your head that says, maybe I better not say that. And you don't, for peace reasons. That wasn't me. I did everything I could, but I was turning into a monster. I was yelling at my kids. They're small kids. But I couldn't take anything. There were certain things that I normally could do that I couldn't take anymore. Like my son pointed a Nerf gun at me. I flipped out. I broke the gun in 2, threw it in the garbage, and went and lived in the woods for 3 days.
Wow.
I'm turning into this monster. I'm going downhill so fast. I can't take it no more. I'm not sleeping in the bed because I'm having such night terrors that I don't want to wake up my wife. I want her to sleep. So I'm sleeping downstairs, and I think to myself, and I've been ruminating for some time, because something important is I never carried my off-duty gun ever. I started carrying my off-duty gun because I wasn't sleeping. I was getting paranoid. And when I was out in the woods, I had my gun with me, and these thoughts start to creep in. Well, you know what? I don't want people to see me like this. Maybe I should depart. Maybe I should go away. So one night at about 2 a.m., I decide I don't want to do this no more. I'm gonna tap out. I go into my office, which was it was a converted bedroom right by where the living room was, and I grab my weapon. It was a Chief Special 38, nickel plated, lightning grips, customized to me. It's beautiful. Hollow point bullets, everything. Write a note, and I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to end all this pain. My kids, listen, they'll be financial, and that's all you think about. Right. My kids will be financially secure. It's all I cared about. I'm holding this gun in my hand, and this gun, the gun actually weighs 1.9 pounds. And the gun it felt like a 50-pound weight. It's a double action gun, so if you cock the hammer back, it's a lighter trigger pull. I cock the hammer back, I put the gun in my mouth. And I'm just replaying the incident in my head, the whole incident. I'm saying sorry, like, my grandfather was one of the most important people in my life to me ever. I'm saying sorry to him. I don't know who I'm talking to. I'm not talking to anybody. I'm down there, and these thoughts are going through my head. And I stayed there with the gun in my mouth for about 20 minutes. And at the end of 20 minutes, I pause. I don't know. It's like this long pause of nothingness. No thoughts going through my head, just clear. I take the gun out of my hand, and I stare at it for probably another 20 minutes. Just looking at it, I'm like, and looking back on it, it was pretty foolish of me, but I'm not thinking clearly. I'm trying to put a rational spin on an irrational behavior. If I would have done that at that time, what's the likelihood of my kids finding me or my wife coming down? My wife to this day will say, at that time in our life, I didn't know whether I was going to come downstairs and find my husband dead. I had no idea what the pause was. I had no idea what made me stop, what pulled the gun out of my mouth, but I can still taste that metal on my tongue. I can still taste the gunpowder on that end of that gun. I can still feel the sight hitting the two front teeth. What made me pause? And I couldn't answer that for the longest time. After that, I knew I needed help. I took my gun, I shipped it out of my house. I gave it to a friend, and I didn't want to tell anybody what had just happened. All I told him was, hey, bro, listen, I just need you to take my gun. I put it in a lockbox, just hold on to it for a little bit. And they knew, like they knew. Now at the time, people are reaching out to me, but I don't want to talk to nobody. So people are trying to get to me, but I have no interest in talking to anybody because I don't want them to see. I'm hiding it to the world. But I knew I needed help because the drinking had gotten out of control. I knew I needed to go away. I checked myself into rehab. And rehab wasn't the place for me. I don't do well inside enclosed walls. And there are people who need it much more than I need it. But after I checked myself out of rehab, I never drank again. Never drank again.
Amazing.
So then I start going to group therapy. And I start realizing that these unknown behaviors inside of me, other people exhibit them as well. They exhibit pain. And I'm able to revisit and go to my place of pain just a little bit more each time. And then when I go out of therapy, I continue to hide it, but at least in one place I'm able to do it. And then the weirdest things started happening. I started sleeping just a night, maybe not 7 nights, but I slept one night. I'm good with that. And it just continued. And a lot of the pain subsided. I never forgot what had happened. So fast forward, during lockdown, I just wanted to start a show because once I turned around and faced my pain, things got better for me. And once I retired, I finally was able to retire from the police department on an accidental disability. Once I was able to retire, I was able to give that piece to some other people, from things that I've learned. Okay, this is what it's not uncommon what you're going to go through. I felt better. And when I reached out to another person, I felt better. So I start this show, the Suffering Podcast, because I believe that if you face your pain and you visit that place of pain, you can actually show people miracles. And a miracle is showing people a changed life. Right? Podcast, what?
Would you say that that's the number one thing in your healing, your journey to healing and wellness and wholeness? Would you say it's just owning it, basically owning that pain and not running from it, not self-medicating because of it?
So years ago, I'm on a plane trip and I was reading a book on something, it's surviving worst case scenarios or something like that. And it was how to survive a prairie fire. Well, I live in New Jersey. There are no prairies in New Jersey. A human being, when they see danger, it's their instinct to run the other way, to get away from the danger. With a prairie fire, if you do that, that prairie fire is just going to grow and grow and grow, and it's going to consume you. Running away from it is not the way to beat a prairie fire. You actually got to run straight through it. And you're going to get through on the other side. You're going to be a little scarred. You're going to be a little charred, but you're going to be alive. And just to put it into terms that everybody can understand, if you don't pay your credit card bill this month, is it going away? Of course not. Of course not. So I took that theory and I started applying it to other guests and people coming in with some real genuine pain, and they were able to get a little bit of peace. And I was able to get a little peace. It's therapy. Then came episode 17. And I don't know whether I should be happy or sad about this, because I had a gentleman in by the name of Adam Burt. Adam, I had him in because he was a professional hockey player. I'm a sports guy.
He's been here. He's been here in the podcast.
He bring him in, and I think we're gonna start talking about some old hockey stories. He was a Philadelphia Flyer, and I'm a South Jersey kid. I'm like, wow, this is great. He was one of the first big guests that we had on our show when we were just on audio. And I meet him for coffee one day before the show, and we're talking. We had a great conversation. About 2 days later, I get a text from him. He says, like, hey, he calls me KD. He's like, hey, KD, I'm praying for you. I'm like, what? You're praying for me? Like, who are you serious? Like, why are you praying for me? Why do I deserve your prayers? Like, what are you talking about? It threw me off, but it just kept resonating in my head over and over again. And I couldn't wrap my head around it. Now, one of the things I do with my show is I always support my guests, always. You know, if they have an event, I'll go to their event. If they have something going on, I'll always support them. Well, Adam was no different. So he says, well, you know, I'm the pastor of Every Nations Church in New Jersey, right in Morris Plains. And it turns out it's like 5 minutes from my house. I go to church one day with my boys, and it was the strangest thing in the world. So they have the worship leader, Kim, starts singing, and she's got a beautiful voice. Mm-hmm. And I start crying. Now, mind you, I'm with my two boys. I brought my two boys with me that day as sort of like a buffer in case I needed to bolt. In case I needed to get out. Oh, well, I'm sorry, one of them went to the bathroom in their pants. I'm going. You know, it was my built-in excuse. But I'm crying, and I'm trying not to have my kids see me cry, because as a man, you're not supposed to show weakness. That's what we're taught from little kids. If you're hurt, get up, rub some dirt on it, walk it off, stop it. I couldn't control it. So the next week happened. I said, you know what? I tell my wife, I'm going to go to church again. She says, really? You're going to go to church? I'm like, yeah, I want to go to church.
So this is your second visit?
It's my second visit. And the tears started flowing again. Mm. And Adam is up there giving his sermon, and I don't know what happened, but whatever he was talking about touched me so deeply that I'll bet you I haven't missed, and usually when I miss, it's because of a kid's sporting event. I haven't missed more than 5 in 2.5 years, because I need that. Like, I get a lot out of that. So looking back, that pause, when I had that gun in my mouth, when I'm at the lowest of the low of my life, that pause, I started thinking, I said, that was there for a reason. I would have missed so much had I done that. There were some great things coming. I just had to make it to the next day. And I strongly believe that was my God telling me, you're not done yet.
Wow.
You got a little bit more to do.
What a journey.
And what you just said, that is the hope that we all have to cling to, is in that moment of desperation, that we just choose to not see it as a dead end. I mean, for you, a literal dead end. And so often, those of us that are even watching someone going through suffering, we want them to just see that there's so much more to come. And yet at the time, it seems like it's hopeless. And that's what you're describing. I mean, Kevin, you now on your suffering podcast, and I love that name, because who of us hasn't had suffering?
Well, what I've come to realize is, who's King Sufferer? It's Jesus Christ. Because if Jesus hadn't suffered the way that he did, he would have been just some Jewish guy wandering around in the desert with his 12 friends and some woman at home really mad at him. That's what he would have done. Now, so now I do guerrilla tactics. If I go out there and they're like, well, what changed you? Life changed. I'll never come out and say that faith is part of my recovery, but I'll show them, and then it'll work itself in there. And so eventually somebody will come up with this, and they'll say, well, how do you know Jesus was real? And I said, you want to know how I know? Here's how I know. He had 12 friends around with him. After he was crucified, his body was buried. Third day, rose again, no body. Romans knew this. We know this today in the police world. No body, no crime. So the Romans had to look for the body in order to disprove his existence. So they took 12 of his friends and they tortured the hell out of them. They beat them. They did horrible, horrible things to them. They killed them. Do you know not one of them broke? Look at that. Right. Look at that in today's standards. Geez, a gangster gets caught out on the street. Before you know it, he's singing like a bird. 12 people get arrested instead of the one person getting arrested. They never broke. That's unheard of. That is impossible. One person's going to say.
It's truly an evidence that Jesus rose from the dead.
And when you say they never broke, you're meaning they never deviated from their conviction, which we know is not just a conviction, it's absolute truth, that his body is not there because he rose from the dead. And they did not compromise that story.
If his body was anywhere to be found and that was a false narrative, one of them would have given it up. Oh yeah, it's over behind the tree. One of them would have given it up because of the pain they got put through.
Right.
Oh yeah, all of them. It wasn't worth it anymore. I mean, they were already on tottering a little bit. After Jesus died, they're like, we didn't expect the Messiah to die. But Jesus warned them multiple times. And he said, here's what's going to happen to me. I'm going to suffer. I'm going to be beaten. I'm going to be falsely accused. They're going to crucify. They're going to kill me. They're going to torture me and kill me. But he said, but I'll come back on the third day. He told them exactly what would happen. And that is these disciples then, when they saw the resurrection in his body, some of them wanted to feel his body. They wanted that existential moment where they could touch his hands and his feet. Thomas was like that, and perhaps others. And Jesus then gave them 40 days of giving them the teaching, being with them, eating. I mean, come on, a resurrected man, he's eating fish at the seashore. It's like the old days with his disciples, those 3 years with them. They were having their own picnic, which is a sign that God does value physical things. A lot of us think that physical things don't really matter. We're Platonic in the sense of like physical things are evil and the spiritual world is good. Not so with God and his kingdom. It's the spiritual world is sacred and the physical world, your job, what you eat, how you live, how you exercise, how you think, it's all of great value. So those disciples went out and they did something that was so radical. They changed the world. They went in 12 different directions. They went to the north, south, east, and west. Before going to Europe, the gospel was being taken into the northern part of Africa. So the gospel is not just for white people. It was for tan people, then black people first, and then white people next, in the flow of just how the gospel was being spread around the world. And now we're standing on the shoulder of giants. And you didn't crack either. I mean, you were down but not out.
Came close, but nothing good ever comes if you haven't suffered from it. If I gave you $1 million today and you had nothing, but I just gave you $1 million, you wouldn't appreciate it. We wouldn't appreciate the love of Jesus had he not suffered. The disciples wouldn't have appreciated. I wouldn't have appreciated my life as it sits today had I not gone through some really, really bad times.
And I'd like to say that you have been mightily used by God to bring hope, to bring comfort. A lot of people just need to hear that they're not the only ones who are thinking this way.
That's right.
And of course, this podcast is, what are you thinking?
Can you imagine a world if you had no faith? Like, I know there's some atheists out there, and can you imagine what a bleak existence that is?
There's no purpose. There's no reason.
And without purpose, if you've ever had an incident in your life where you have no purpose, you feel worthless. That's how I felt. I felt purposeless. I wasn't working. And, so when you're younger in life, the devil actually will show you, what you can understand how people get tricked by the devil, because the devil's going to make it sound good, smell good, taste good, feel good, right? He's going to promise you all these things, and they're very hollow promises, but you don't know that. It's like, so we all watch The Price is Right, and we all watch the big wheel and the showcase showdown. The lights are flashing, it looks sexy, and you're gonna win all this money. Did you ever see a picture of what that showcase showdown wheel looks like from the backside? I want you to Google it. I want you to Google it and look it up. It is the most bleak, drab thing you will ever see. And that is the promises of all these good things in life. I'm going to be a social media influencer. I'm going to be a podcast superstar. But they're not looking at all the work that goes on underneath it, which is a perspective that both of you have right now about all the work that goes on underneath these shows. But to bring this full circle, this is the pivotal moment of my life, because everything that's happened to me, everything that has happened in my life has led me right here, right now. And that's a great thing. My whole life has been leading me towards meeting you. And I'm here for a reason. And I know what the good thing is I finally know what the reason is. My reason is to love this world, and to love this life, and to love Jesus, and to love God, and to love those people who love me also. So, and that all came from visiting my places of pain.
Yes. When you talk to your guests, and then I want to talk for a minute about your new book. When you talk to your guests, and it's called a Suffering Podcast, what is the string that you see woven through every single person's story of suffering?
They have to face their pain in order to, their future depends on it.
Wow.
Their future depends on their facing of their pain, and how to reshape that word suffering and mold it where it's no longer a detriment to your personality, but it's a strength. There was one in particular, two in particular. One of them is a gentleman named Gene Halberger, lost his son to suicide when he was 17 years old, was getting bullied horribly. And the young man took his own life. Gene was distraught. We had a mutual connection through Gene. He came in, and he was living in Lake George, so it was a 4-hour drive. He recorded, never really talked about it all that much, recorded. On the drive home, we get a call from him after he got home. He goes, that was about the most peaceful 4-hour ride I've ever had in my life.
Amazing.
Just because he released that stuff.
Yeah.
And the one that's airing recently, and this shows you how suffering can bring you full circle. I suffered early on. I grew up very screwed up, and I took it out on other kids. Especially when I was 12 and 13, I bullied this kid named Jay Aponte. And Jay was a nice kid. Jay was a great kid. And
is Jay listening to us right now?
Well, Jay will listen to you, because I'll send this to him. I had him in on audio, and listen, we made amends. We really did make amends. But
you tracked him down, by the way. I love the story you were telling us before the show started. That this kid, you're bullying him. You guys are both young, and it haunts you.
It haunted me, and it changed the course of my life. His name is Jesus Aponte, and if you have any idea how much research I did, look up Jesus Aponte on social media. You'll find about 4,000 of them. So I looked everywhere for this kid, because he left school in 8th grade, and I felt really bad about this kid. Didn't deserve it. He wasn't a bad kid. He didn't do anything to me, but I was not okay inside, and I took out my anger on him. So I looked for him, couldn't find him, but what it did throughout my life, it changed the course of my life. So when I saw somebody getting bullied, I was that first guy to step in there. When I raise my kids, I teach them, you see somebody getting bullied and you don't step in, you're going to get bullied by me. Like that's what's going to happen. You stand up for people. And as a police officer, you stand up for people who cannot stand up for themselves.
Right.
Right. So it's been a theme throughout my life. And I'm thankful now that I know Jay. I'm good friends with him. He's a cop, which blows my mind because this is a guy I lost an opportunity with. This guy I should have been friends with.
Yeah.
Jay did something when I first made contact with him. He did something that really destroyed me. And this is going to get to something we talked about earlier. I said, Jay, listen, I'm so sorry about the way I acted when I was a child. Things were not right at home. I know it's not an excuse, but it wasn't. I don't think it was about you. I think it was more about me. He gets on the phone and he says, I forgive you. I'm like, what? Come on, curse me out. Do something. Say I'm a horrible person. Do whatever you got to do. But he says, no, I forgive you. And I broke down and started crying.
Now that's extraordinary. I guess he's a believer.
He is.
He's been forgiven.
He is.
Those of us who have been forgiven, then we have the grace to forgive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is the gift. This is the gift. And we're learning a lot about forgiveness through rehab centers and places like that when people learn to forgive, that begins to change everything in their life when they learn to get through it. And that doesn't mean that the pain will leave instantly. And everyone who's asking, why is this happening to me? You've heard that. We've all heard it. I had it this morning on my walk back from dropping off the girls at school. I had a man call me. He's been in chronic pain for years. And he says, I'm about to lose it. Why is this happening to me? And the reality is faith isn't real unless you're going through a why is this happening to me moment. And we cannot answer that question. We can't answer why is this unless you jumped out in front of a car and got hit by it, which, but this is where many people are living in that tension of I know that there's something more for me. I know that there's something better for me, whether that's healing or whatever that is, or they are in this place of despair. And at that moment, what do they need to do? Just hang on. I said, you've done everything you could do to the guy. I said, you've done it all. Now it's time to stand.
God gives his hardest battles to his strongest soldiers.
There you go.
That's the first thing.
Go.
The second thing, and this is something I heard recently, it's, when we're born, we spend our entire lives learning how to live. Those that were taken early accomplish that goal.
Yeah.
And I think I said that on your episode when you came in on the show. And I firmly believe that. So if you're looking for a reason why, those are two reasons why. Like why'd that baby have to die? Why did Jordan have to die?
Right. Yeah.
Because they accomplished the
Finished
goal.
Their mission.
Yes.
Yes, indeed. It's true.
And we have a lifetime, we have an eternity ahead of us. The perspective of eternal life is so empowering because you feel like there's hope beyond the now, beyond the fallen earth that we live in.
Absolutely.
It chokes me up because I just know there's so many people out there listening today that your story's given them hope to just hang on, to not choose to end the story. I always compare it to when you're reading a book and you get through a chapter and you hate that chapter. You're like, it's either boring or you hate the character or you just want to put it all away. But if you stick to the end, and our daughter-in-law, who's married to our son who passed away through cancer at 23, she said something to me in the early months after Jordan's death that really helped me. She said, the fact that I can't understand what God's up to right now actually makes me trust him more because he is the grand script writer. And he's writing a story that if I could figure it all out, he wouldn't be big enough for me to trust him. And that just really struck me. And that's what I hear in your story, Kevin, is this confidence in your life that you come to, that there is a bigger storyline to what God had prepared for you to do. And you're living it now. You're doing it. You're making a difference for people. Tell us about your new book that's coming out, why you wrote it, what it's about.
So my co-author is a gentleman named Chris Anderson. He was a homicide detective in Birmingham, Alabama. You've seen him on First 48 and Reasonable Doubt on Discovery Channel. Him and I connected, and even though he's worlds away, we had all these similar stories about how that glass, as we spoke about earlier, gets filled and filled and filled. And how do we deal with this? We want to change the face of mental health inside police work, because we're type A personalities. We don't like asking for help. And we want people to know that you're not the only one having these feelings inside of you. You're not the only one that's gone through these things. And it could be something innocuous that one day that's going to just spill your glass over. So we wrote this book talking about some stories. It's getting analyzed by people in the mental health field, professionals because we're not professionals. I'm not a professional. I just have heard a lot of really damaged people. And we got together and we put this thing together. We got a publisher. We got the PR people. They're going at it. And I'm hoping it comes out in fall of 2023. You can find all about it at manyouarecrazy.com.
Man, you are crazy. Wow. Sounds like it's going to be great. And your podcast, your suffering podcast, when Ron went on, I remember driving home, he called me and he said, that was powerful.
I was mostly afraid to hear your words, because usually the wives, I'm like, did I do your husband justice? Because I don't want to get a punch in the face, because they'll be the ones that defend their man. They're the ones where the punch is coming from. So that's why I reached out to you immediately afterwards. I'm like, okay, tell me what you think. I need to know what you think.
Oh, Kevin, you're in your sweet spot. You really are. And I love how what was really meant to bring you down, and every one of us has some God in the hands of an almighty good God. And because you've allowed it, and because you've faced your pain, like you said, you have now turned what was meant for evil into good. And the hope as Christians is that redemption belongs to us. Redemption. It's one thing to forget it and move on, but to watch God use what was so bad and so destructive for good, not only for your good, but for others. It's so hope-filled. If you're watching today, or for those of you that are tuned in and listening, we want you to know that there is hope for you. We'd love to have you continue to tune in here, because our goal every single week and every broadcast is to help these stories give you hope, help you to realize your story's not over yet, and that Jesus Christ, who's done it for each of us here today, can also do it for you. He can make the difference you've been looking for. And it's not just religion, it's relationship that we crave, that we long for, that helps put right all the other relationships in our life. So we want you to have that hope today.
So many years ago, actually decades ago, I was a lifeguard. And one of the things that I would occasionally have to do from the boat is throw the lifeline out and be able to have people something to lay hold of. And Kevin has reminded us today that the thief, and these are the words of Jesus, the thief has come to steal, kill, and destroy. But Jesus said, but I have come that you might have a life, and more abundantly. And if you can just get through this moment, like you've said many times to God, okay, maybe I can't look forward to a year from now, but let's just deal with today. One day at a time.
That's right. I have said that many times. And it's because I've had my own places of suffering where you really don't know. And you were describing that night with the gun in your mouth. I mean, we get to these points where we do not have a clue how anything's going to change.
Kevin, aren't you glad? Aren't you thankful? I mean, those who are listening now, those who are viewing, where would we be without you? Where would your family be without you?
Where would I be without you?
Yeah,
and you
and all of us, and this is so critically
important. Ron and
Lynette
Lewis have been a powerful force in my life.
Kevin, I just get this sense that there are people right now who have suicidal ideation. They're thinking about it, and what we want to say is that we want to say, let's change your thoughts.
Well, there's something that recently came to my attention. Our most basic human function to keep us all alive is one breath in and one breath out.
Automatically.
I have not met anybody that can take 2 breaths at a time.
Yeah.
One breath at a time, and it'll get you to the next moment.
Boy,
thank you for sharing that.
That's good.
Thank you.
Kevin, can we close this out with you just looking at our camera? And obviously those that are listening will hear it. Can you just speak a word of hope into the hearts of people? Maybe those that have felt they're racked with guilt. They've blown it. They feel like a failure. They feel like they've made so many mistakes. it's easy to look at you and to listen to you and think, wow, he's got so much going for him, even in the natural. But why don't you just give a final word here to those that we haven't seen yet face to face, but we know are out there. What do you want to say to them?
If you think I have it all together, you would be 100% wrong. I have my moments of doubt. I have my moments of struggle. I have my moments of suffering. But here's what I know. I know that I'm not done yet, and neither are you. I know that my vulnerabilities and your vulnerabilities are one day going to become your strengths, because ultimately, your job is to connect to other people once you're through your trauma, once you're through your bad times, because we connect to people through our vulnerabilities, not with our strengths.
It's good. It's good.
It's true, too. It's very true. So we all suffer, and we have to endure through our suffering. And my answer, or my stories of suffering, is clinging to God. Just never letting go of God. Because for sure, he's never let go of us. We say, I'm committed to God. God says, no, I'm committed to you.
And one of the ways that I've learned to do that is there are times where I just, under my breath, will cry out and say, Jesus, I need you right now. Help me. Don't know what to pray. Don't know what to say. Don't know what to do. Jesus, help me. If you're real, help me. If you're there, help me. I think there are people that can almost follow that script right now who are listening to us today, to just cry out in your ignorance, even though you don't know who you're crying out to, but just cry out and he will meet you there.
Let's say a quick prayer. We want to pray for you who are listening and you guys right now. Lord, we thank you that you're a God who saves. You have sent the helper, the Holy Spirit, into this world, into our hearts, minds, lives. And we pray for those right now who are in that moment of despair. And they too are crying out saying, help me. And God, we believe with all of our hearts that you are helping each person individually, every household. The households that we grew in were so destructive and so bad. But God, you're a God who redeems, and you're a God who restores, and you're a God who saves. And we pray right now for every person listening that you would let them know for sure that your arm is not short, that it cannot save. Lord, you are with us. You're an ever-present, living God in our world, in our lives. And we pray today that we rise above the fray, above the lies, above the deception, and we call upon your name, the name that is the name above all names, in the name of Jesus. And that name, without that name, no one can be saved, but in the name of Jesus, as we confess that you are Lord and believe in our hearts, God, that you have raised him from the dead, you said we shall be saved. And Lord, we thank you for your grace this day. In your name, amen.
So amen. Glad you joined us, Kevin. Thanks. Wonderful to have you.
Thank you so much.
Incredible.
For having me.
Incredible
great,
story.
Very important to me to be
brother.
here.
Thank God for you. Really.
Awesome to be together. We'll see you next time.